I pulled up to my gate and saw all my tools scattered across the front yard like garbage. My daughter-in-law Harper appeared with that fake smile and said, "We decided to do some cleaning. Those old things were taking up too much space." I looked her straight in the eye and replied calmly, "Then I'm also going to clean out what's no longer useful to me." I took out my cell phone. It was time to show who really runs things here. My name is Wesley Porter, and I'm 68 years old. I will never forget that moment, that precise instant when my life split in two. I had just returned from Oklahoma, where I'd buried my younger brother Spencer after watching him fight lung cancer for 8 months. I was still wearing the black suit that stuck to my skin from the August heat. I could still smell the fresh dirt and wilted flowers from the graveside. I could still hear my nephew's voice breaking as he said goodbye to his father. I came back destroyed. I came back with a broken soul. I came back needing a cold beer, a quiet evening on the porch, and maybe a simple sorry for your loss from my son Mitchell. But what I found was chaos. I opened the gate of my ranch. Well, my ranch. That 5-acre spread in the Texas Hill Country that I bought myself after working 42 years at the Ford plant in Austin. That land I'd cleared with my own hands, building the workshop where I'd restored 3 classic trucks and accumulated the finest collection of vintage tools in Gillespie County. Those tools weren't just equipment to me, they were history. My grandfather, Earl Porter, had brought half of them from Pennsylvania in 1963 when he moved to Texas. Hand-forged hammers from the 1940s, precision micrometers from his machinist days, socket sets that had built everything from Model Ts to modern engines. When he passed in 1985, he left them to me with one simple instruction. These tools built 3 generations of Porter men. Don't let them gather dust. I didn't. For 38 years, I used those tools every weekend. I taught Mitchell how to change oil with my grandfather's 3/8 drive set. I showed him how to gap spark plugs with Earl's feeler gauges. Every bolt I turned, every engine I rebuilt, I was continuing a tradition that started before I was born. That ranch I'd gifted to my son 3 years ago when he married Harper, because a father always wants to see his children established. I thought we'd work the land together, maybe restore another truck. Pass those tools down one more generation. And there they were. All my tools thrown in the dirt as if they were junk. My Craftsman socket sets, my vintage snap-on wrenches, my grandfather's hand-forged hammers lying next to a mesquite tree like scrap metal, my work boots, my coveralls, the framed photos of my late wife Sarah. Everything, absolutely everything, piled up in the Texas sun. I stood paralyzed. My truck keys fell from my hands. "What the hell?" I whispered, feeling the air escape my chest. And then she appeared. Harper came out of my house wearing a flowing white dress, one of those that probably cost $300. Her hair was freshly done, her makeup perfect for the camera. She looked like she'd just finished filming one of her lifestyle videos while I came from burying my brother. "Oh, Wesley, I'm so glad you're finally here," she said with that sweet, fake voice she always used with me. "We decided to do a major cleanup of the property. You know, all those old things were cluttering up the space and, well, they're pretty much useless now for a modern lifestyle brand." I stared at her. My hands were trembling. "Old things?" I repeated slowly. "Harper, those are my belongings. There are photos of my wife, my grandfather's tools, my work clothes." "Oh yes, I know," she interrupted with a wave of her hand like someone shooing away a fly. "But we needed the space in your workshop. We're converting it into my content studio. Didn't Mitchell tell you? My Instagram following has grown to 75,000, and I need a professional setup for filming." I felt a punch to my gut. Content studio? My workshop where I'd spent 15 years restoring trucks, where I'd taught my son everything he knew about engines, where my grandfather's workbench still held the coffee stains from Saturday mornings when 3 generations of Porter men would plan their projects. And I was finding out like this, after having my life's work thrown into the dirt. "Harper, I need to talk to Mitchell," I managed to say, though my voice was cracking. "He's at the drilling site near Midland. Won't be back until late, but don't worry. We left a little space for you. Come, let me show you." She took me by the arm with that fake familiarity that irritated me so much. She led me to the back of the property, to the old travel trailer that we'd used for hunting trips and storing seasonal equipment. She opened the door. "Ta-da, you can stay here." We cleaned it up a bit, put in a folding bed. It's cozy but sufficient. Just so you know, we need you to be discreet. You understand, with my content creation, we can't have interruptions or people who get in the way of the aesthetic. I looked at that trailer. It was barely 8 feet by 20 feet. It smelled like mildew and old camping gear. The only window faced the back fence where I kept the burn pile. The folding bed had a thin, stained mattress that looked like it came from a garage sale. Something inside me broke. But something else, something deeper, something that had been built over 42 years of hard work and honest living, ignited. This wasn't just about space or convenience. This was about respect. This was about legacy. This was about everything my grandfather had taught me about being a man and everything I'd tried to teach my son. I looked her straight in the eye. Harper kept smiling, expecting me to lower my head, to accept, to say, "Thank you for giving me a corner of the ranch I built with my own hands." Instead, I took a deep breath. "You know what, Harper?" I said with a calm that even surprised me. "You're absolutely right. It is time to do some cleaning, a deep cleaning of everything that no longer serves me." Her smile faltered for just a second. I took my cell phone out of my pocket. I looked for a number I'd saved for years. Pierce Coleman, my attorney. "What are you doing?" asked Harper, no longer with the fake sweetness in her voice. "Cleaning," I replied. "Exactly what you suggested." I dialed the number. I heard the ringtone. And while I waited for them to answer, I looked Harper straight in the eye. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't look away. Because in that moment, I understood something. I had gifted that ranch out of love. But never, ever had I gifted my dignity. And they were about to discover who really ran things there. Pierce answered on the third ring. "Wesley, what happened?" His voice sounded worried. He knew I'd just buried my brother. "Pierce, I need to see you tomorrow morning." "It's urgent," I said without taking my eyes off Harper. She had completely lost that fake smile. Now she looked at me with narrowed eyes, calculating, dangerous. "Are you okay?" asked the attorney. "No, but I'm going to be," I replied and hung up. Harper crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're planning, Wesley, but I remind you that this ranch belongs to Mitchell and I'm his wife. So if you want to stay here, you're going to have to follow our rules." I gritted my teeth. I wanted to scream at her that I had bought this ranch with the sweat of 42 years working the assembly line, that every fence post on those 5 acres carried my sacrifice, that Mitchell was barely 30 years old when I gifted it to him without asking for a single dollar in return. But I said nothing, because I had learned something in my 68 years of life. Words without power are just noise, and I needed to recover my power first. "Is that so?" I said simply. "I'll stay in the trailer." Harper blinked, surprised. I think she expected a fight. She expected drama. She expected me to yell or beg. "Ah, well, good that you understand," she said, recovering a bit of her composure. "And another thing, there's no more space in the main refrigerator for your things, so you'll have to buy your own food and keep it in the trailer. We also can't be sharing the kitchen at all hours. My nutritionist says I must avoid stress for optimal content creation." I nodded slowly. "Sure, no problem. Perfect." "Then welcome to your new space," she said, and walked into the house, swaying her hips as if she'd just won a battle. I stayed alone in that tiny trailer. I closed the door and then, only then, did I allow myself to break down. I cried for my brother Spencer. I cried for my wife Sarah, who'd been dead for 8 years. I cried for the man I had been, strong, hard-working, proud. I cried for my son Mitchell, who once hugged me and told me, "Dad, you're my hero." When had everything changed? I sat on that folding bed that smelled musty. I looked around. The walls had water stains. The light bulb hung from a bare wire. There wasn't even a hook to hang clothes. But then I remembered something. I remembered my father, who had worked in the oil fields for 40 years without complaining. I remembered how he told us, "Son, a man isn't strong because of what he has. He's strong because of what he's capable of rebuilding when everything is taken from him." I wiped my tears. I took out my cell phone and started taking photos of the trailer, of my belongings thrown in the dirt, of everything. Because if life had taught me anything, it's that the truth always needs proof. That night, Mitchell arrived past 11. I heard his truck park. I heard voices. I heard Harper's high-pitched laugh echoing across the property. I waited. I thought he would come to see me, that he would knock on the trailer door, that he would ask me how I was after my brother's funeral. But he didn't come. At midnight, when I couldn't take it anymore, I left the trailer. I walked barefoot across the gravel driveway, feeling the stones under my feet. I knocked on the main house door, my house, the one I'd paid for with overtime shifts and weekend work. "Mitchell," I called softly. Silence. "Mitchell, son, I need to talk to you." The door opened just a crack. My son poked his head out. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes, thinner than the last time I'd seen him. His work shirt hung loose on his frame. "Dad, it's late," he whispered. "What is it?" "What is it?" I repeated, feeling my voice crack. "Mitchell, they threw all my things into the dirt. They put me in the trailer. And you didn't even tell me that Harper is turning my workshop into a studio." He lowered his gaze. "Dad, I was going to tell you, but you were in Oklahoma with Uncle Spencer, and I just buried my brother Mitchell. I just said goodbye to the only family I had left of my generation, and I come home to find that I'm being treated like hired help." "It's not personal, Dad," he said, rubbing his eyes. "It's just that we need the space. With Harper's career taking off, things have to change." "Change?" I looked at him in disbelief. "Mitchell, I built this ranch. I gave it to you because I thought you'd want me here, that we'd be a family. And we are, Dad. But Harper, she's stressed. The business has been demanding. The doctor says we must not upset her." "And me?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "Don't I matter?" Mitchell sighed. "Of course you matter, Dad. But you have to understand, Harper is now my family, my priority. You yourself always told us that when a man gets married, his wife comes first." Every word was like a knife wound. "Not like this, son," I whispered. "Not like this. Dad, please, we're tired. We'll talk tomorrow, okay? Try to be understanding." And he closed the door. I stood on that porch trembling. My son, my Mitchell, the boy whose diapers I'd changed, whom I'd taught to drive, whom I'd hugged every time he cried. That son had just closed the door in my face. I returned to the trailer like a ghost, but I didn't cry anymore because something inside me had changed. The sadness was turning into something else, into determination, into silent fury, into the absolute certainty that this could not stay like this. I sat on that folding bed and opened the drawer of my nightstand. There I kept something that no one knew I had, an old notebook where I'd kept record of all the ranch expenses since I'd given it to Mitchell. I started turning the pages, and what I saw made my blood run cold, but it also gave me the first weapon I needed to fight. What I discovered that night changed everything. And the worst part is that they had no idea what was coming. The notebook trembled in my hands. It was 2 a.m. The trailer was in absolute silence. Only the dripping of a poorly closed faucet could be heard somewhere on the property. I turned the pages slowly, feeling my heartbeat faster with every line I read. I had always been organized with money. I had to be. When you grow up poor in East Texas, you learn that every dollar counts. So when I gave the ranch to Mitchell, I asked him for something very simple. "Son, I just want you to keep me informed of the important expenses, not for control, but because this ranch is your heritage, and heritage must be taken care of." He had accepted. During the first year, Mitchell showed me the receipts, told me about the repairs. We were a team. But since he married Harper, everything had changed. I looked at the numbers again, feeling the blood rushing to my head. In the last 18 months, transfers for enormous amounts had gone out of the family bank account. I had access to the bank statements because Mitchell had given me a debit card for emergencies, but I had never used it. I only checked the movements occasionally, and now seeing everything together, reality hit me like a sledgehammer. $2,100 in February 2023. Home improvements. $2,800 in March 2023. Furniture and decor, $1,900 in April 2023. No description. $3,200 in May 2023. Business equipment, $20,600 in June 2023. Travel and marketing, $2,400 in July 2023. Studio setup, $2,300 in August 2023. No description. $2,700 in September 2023. Content creation tools, $2,100 in October 2023. Vehicle maintenance, $2,200 in November 2023. Business expenses, $2,000 in December 2023. Holiday marketing, $2,800 in January 2024. Equipment upgrades, between $200 in February 2024. No description. $2,500 in March 2024. Spring renovation, $2,300 in April 2024. Professional development, $2,600 in May 2024. Summer preparation, $2,400 in June 2024. Mid-year equipment, $2,100 in July 2024. Content expansion. I added mentally. It was hard work because my hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the pencil. $41,200. Over $41,000 in 18 months. That was almost $2,300 every single month. Where did that money come from? Mitchell earned well as a petroleum engineer, about $7,000 a month gross. But after taxes, that was maybe $5,200 take home. After the ranch mortgage payment of $2,200, utilities averaging $300, insurance $150, food and gas, there wasn't that much left. Definitely not enough to spend $2,300 a month on extras. Then I remembered something that froze my blood. When I gave the ranch to Mitchell, I also left him access to a savings account that I had maintained for years. It was money from my insurance settlement when I retired, plus savings I had gathered over decades of overtime shifts and careful living. $45,000. I told him, "Son, this is for emergencies, so that you never lack anything." With trembling hands, I searched through my papers until I found the last statement of that savings account. I opened it and my world collapsed. Current balance, $3,800. Of $45,000, only $3,800 remained. I felt the trailer spinning. I had to sit on the floor, leaning against the paneled wall, trying to breathe. More than $41,000 gone in 18 months. And me without knowing because I was busy taking care of my sick brother in Oklahoma, because I trusted my son, because never, ever did I think they would do something like this to me. But the worst wasn't the money. The worst was realizing that they had used me. They had kicked me out of my ranch. They had taken my space. They had humiliated me with the money that I myself had given them. I got up from the floor. My legs were trembling, but I walked to the small window of the trailer. Outside, in the darkness, I could see the light from my neighbor's kitchen. Olivia Martinez. She always got up early to tend her horses before dawn. She was a widow like me, a person who had worked all her life to get her children ahead. And at that moment, I needed to talk to someone. I put on my boots and quietly left the trailer. I walked the 50 yards that separated my property from hers, crossing through the gap in our shared fence line. I knocked gently on her kitchen door. "Who is it?" asked Olivia's voice. "It's me, Olivia. Wesley." The door opened immediately. Olivia looked at me with concern. She knew I had just returned from the funeral. "Wesley, what are you doing awake at this hour? Come in, come in." I entered her small, warm kitchen. It smelled of fresh coffee and homemade tortillas. It smelled of home, of what my house used to be before Harper turned it into a content creation studio. "Coffee?" she offered, pouring me a cup without waiting for an answer. I sat at her old wooden table, and then I couldn't take it anymore. The words started to fall. "Olivia," I whispered, "I need you to tell me the truth. Have you seen anything strange at my ranch these months?" She sat across from me, taking my hands in hers, rough and full of calluses from ranch work. "Wesley, I didn't want to tell you anything because you were with your sick brother. But yes, I've seen things." "What things?" Olivia sighed deeply. "Your daughter-in-law, Harper, she doesn't have a regular job, right?" "No. Mitchell says she doesn't need to work, that her social media thing brings in enough money." "Well, my friend, that girl changes cars every 2 weeks. It's not the same one. I've seen a red convertible, a white SUV, a gray sedan, a black pickup, always different vehicles pulling up to your place. And the packages she gets delivered, they're from those expensive stores online. Williams-Sonoma, Restoration Hardware, Anthropology. The ones that cost hundreds of dollars." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And Mitchell, I see your son leave very early and return very late. He looks tired, Wesley. Very tired and thin, as if he weren't eating well. Sometimes I see him sitting in his truck in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside, like he's gathering courage. Anything else? Olivia hesitated. Then she spoke in a lower voice, like someone sharing a painful secret. The other day I saw that they sold your tools, those vintage ones, the ones you had in the workshop. Some guys came in a truck and took them. Your daughter-in-law was there smiling, counting cash money. The coffee cup shattered in my hands. The hot liquid splashed across Olivia's table. Those tools, that damn collection. It wasn't just equipment, it was my life's work. Tools that were more than 40 years old. Tools that my grandfather Earl had brought from Pennsylvania when he moved to Texas in 1963. Tools that were worth a fortune, not for the money, but for the history, for the generations of portermen who had used them to build their lives. And Harper had sold them like they were junk from a garage sale. How long ago was that? I asked with a voice like gravel. 2 weeks, my friend, when you were in Oklahoma burying Spencer. I remained silent while Olivia cleaned up the broken cup. In my head, the puzzle pieces were starting to come together. The missing money, the excessive spending, the sold tools, my belongings thrown in the dirt, the trailer exile. Harper wasn't only kicking me out of the ranch, she was erasing me. Erasing my history, my memories, my existence. She was systematically removing every trace of Wesley Porter from the land I had built with my own hands, and my son was letting her do it. Olivia, those tools. Do you know who bought them? Some antique dealer from Austin. I heard him tell Harper they were worth a lot more than what he was paying, but she said she just wanted them gone quickly. He gave her $800 cash and loaded up everything. Your grandfather's workbench, all those beautiful old hand tools, even that red toolbox you were always so proud of. $800. For tools worth at least $15,000. For 3 generations of Porter family history. For the workbench where I'd taught Mitchell everything he knew about engines. I felt something break inside my chest, but it wasn't sadness anymore. It was rage. Cold, calculated rage. There's something else, Wesley, Olivia continued carefully. I've seen other men coming to the house. Not workmen, not delivery people. Well-dressed men in expensive cars. They stay for an hour or two, usually when Mitchell's at work. What kind of men? Business types. Suits, nice watches. Harper always comes out to greet them personally, very friendly-like. I thought maybe they were investors or something for her social media business, but what? But why would business meetings happen when her husband isn't home? And why would she need to change cars so often if the business was doing well? The implications hit me like a freight train. Harper wasn't just spending my money, she was hiding something. Something that required cash payments, frequent vehicle changes, and meetings when Mitchell was away. I returned to the trailer as dawn was breaking over the hill country. I sat on that folding bed with the bank statements and my notebook on my lap, and I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted to play games, I was going to play too, but with my own rules. Because they didn't know something very important. They didn't know that this ranch was still legally in my name. Mitchell had never completed the deed transfer paperwork. I had only given him verbal permission to live here, what lawyers call a license to occupy. They didn't know that I had documentation for absolutely everything, every tool, every piece of furniture, every improvement I'd made to this land over the past 15 years. And they didn't know that the man sitting in that miserable trailer wasn't the same one who had arrived yesterday, broken and grieving. That man had been destroyed, but from the ashes, something new was being forged, something harder, something smarter, something with 68 years of experience and nothing left to lose. When the sun finished rising, I already had a plan, and I swear that not even in their worst nightmares did they imagine what I was about to unleash on them. At 9 a.m, sharp, I was knocking on the door of Pierce Coleman's office in Fredericksburg. I had showered in the trailer's cramped bathroom, shaved carefully, and put on my best black suit, the same one from Spencer's funeral. I had combed my gray hair and straightened my shoulders because I had learned something important in all these years. When you're going to fight for what's yours, you dress like you mean business. Pierce Coleman had been handling legal matters for ranch families in Gillespie County for 30 years. He was a straight shooter who understood that out here, a man's word and his land were the most important things he owned. He received me with a firm handshake and the kind of direct eye contact that told me he was ready to listen. Wesley, I'm deeply sorry about Spencer. He was a good man who worked hard all his life. How are you holding up? Thank you, Pierce, I said, feeling the familiar lump in my throat. But I didn't come to talk about grief. I came because I've got a problem that needs fixing. We sat in his office filled with law books, county records, and the kind of oak furniture that lasted generations. He poured me a glass of water and leaned back in his chair, giving me his full attention. I took out my notebook, the bank statements, the photographs of my belongings in the dirt, everything I had gathered, and I told him the whole story, leaving nothing out. While I spoke, I watched Pierce's face transform from concern to surprise, from surprise to professional indignation. He made notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking for clarification on dates and amounts. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Wesley, this is serious. Very serious. What you're describing could constitute several different legal violations. I know. Does your son know that you still have access to those bank statements? He gave me the emergency card years ago, but I think he forgot about it. I never used it for anything except checking the balance occasionally. The attorney nodded slowly, his mind clearly working through the implications. Good. That's important. Let's go step by step. First, the ranch itself. Do you have the original deed? Yes, right here. I pulled the document from my briefcase. I had kept it in a fireproof safe, treating it like the treasure it was. Pierce reviewed it carefully, turning every page with the methodical attention of a man who had seen too many property disputes go wrong because someone got sloppy with paperwork. And then he smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a strategist who had just found the winning move. Wesley, do you understand what we have here? What? The deed is still in your name. 100% ownership, clear title, no liens except the original mortgage, which is current. Mitchell never completed the official transfer process. What you gave him was what we call in law a license to occupy. You essentially lent him the use of the property, but ownership never changed hands. For the first time in days, I felt something that might have been hope. It means you can revoke that permission whenever you choose. It's your property. Legally speaking, they are your tenants without a lease, without any permanent rights to the land. I sat in silence, processing this information like a man who had just discovered he was holding 4 aces in a poker game he thought he was losing. And the money? I asked. The $41,000 that disappeared from my account? Pierce studied the bank statements with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. This is where it gets complicated. Look at these transfer patterns. Most of these withdrawals were made using electronic signatures and debit card access. Did you ever give written authorization for Mitchell to make these transfers? No, never. The card was supposed to be for emergencies only. And did you sign any documents making him a joint account holder or giving him power of attorney over your finances? I thought carefully about every paper I had ever signed. No, the account is solely in my name. He just has a linked debit card. Pierce folded his hands on the desk, his expression grave. Wesley, what you're describing could be classified as elder financial abuse. In Texas, unauthorized use of an elderly person's assets by a family member is a serious crime, even if there's no written contract. The fact that he's your son doesn't give him the right to drain your retirement savings. The words hit me like a physical blow. Elder abuse, my own son. I don't want to see him go to jail, Pierce, I said quickly. I just want this madness to stop, and it will. But you need to understand your position before we decide how to proceed. You're not asking for charity here. You're enforcing your legal rights as the owner of that property and those bank accounts. He pulled out a fresh legal pad and began writing. Here's what we're going to do. First, immediately, we change all passwords and access codes to your financial accounts. You become the sole person with access. No exceptions. I nodded. Second, we prepare a formal inventory of all personal property that was on that ranch when you gave Mitchell permission to live there. Every tool, every piece of furniture, every item that was sold without your authorization. That's theft, Wesley, even if it was committed by family members. Can we prove that legally? With your neighbor's testimony about the tool sale, combined with the fact that you never transferred ownership of the property? Absolutely. Everything on that land was legally yours until you said otherwise. I felt strength flowing back into my body for the first time since I'd found my tools in the dirt. Third, we serve Mitchell with formal notice that he has 30 days to either vacate the property or sign a legal lease agreement with market rate rent and specific terms about property maintenance and financial responsibility. Rent? I asked, still struggling with the concept. From my own son? Pierce looked at me with the patient expression of a man who had explained hard truths to too many fathers over the years. Wesley, your son allowed his wife to kick you out of your own home, put you in a trailer, steal your life savings, and sell your family heirlooms for pocket change. At what point do you think family loyalty should override basic human decency? He was right, and we both knew it. If he refuses to sign the lease, then we begin formal eviction proceedings. With the evidence you have, the unauthorized financial transfers, the sold property, the documented mistreatment, any judge in Texas will rule in your favor within 60 days. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking Main Street. Outside, Fredericksburg was waking up for another day. German heritage buildings housing shops and restaurants, tourists walking around with their families, normal people living normal lives where sons didn't steal from their fathers and daughters-in-law didn't erase family history for social media content. There's one more thing, Pierce said, interrupting my thoughts. Do you have any other assets or income sources that Mitchell doesn't know about? I turned back to him. Yes. Sarah and I have a rental property in town, a small house we bought in 1998. We've been renting it out for years. What's the monthly income from that? $1,400 a month. The money goes into a separate account that I opened just for property maintenance and taxes. Mitchell doesn't know about it. Pierce's smile returned, broader this time. Perfect. That changes everything. You have independent income, which means you can live comfortably without depending on anyone. You're not some helpless old man. You're a property owner with legal rights and financial resources. The realization hit me like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. I wasn't trapped. I wasn't dependent. I wasn't the pathetic old man Harper wanted me to believe I was. What do you really want, Wesley? Pierce asked quietly. Not what you think you should want. Not what would be easiest, but what would give you back your dignity and peace of mind. I thought about my grandfather's tools in some stranger's garage. I thought about the workshop where I'd taught Mitchell to change spark plugs, now converted into a backdrop for lifestyle videos. I thought about the trailer with its stained mattress and the door being closed in my face. But mostly, I thought about respect, about being treated like a human being in my own home, about legacy and what it meant to be a Porter man. I want justice, I said finally. I want them to understand that actions have consequences, and I want my son to remember what I taught him about treating people right. Pierce nodded approvingly. Then we're going to give you exactly that. But Wesley, I need you to be prepared for what's coming. This is going to hurt. There will be tears, screaming, guilt trips. Mitchell is going to try to make you feel like a terrible father. Harper is going to invent sob stories and throw tantrums. They might even try to turn other family members against you. They already tell me I'm selfish and crazy, I said quietly. But now it's going to get worse because now you're fighting back. And when people who are used to getting their way suddenly face consequences, they show their true colors. I took a deep breath, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. I'm ready. Are you sure? I thought about my grandfather Earl, who had worked 50 years without ever taking a handout from anyone. I thought about my father, who had raised 5 children during the oil bust of the 1980s without complaining. I thought about myself at 25, working double shifts at the plant to buy this land. Yes, I said with complete certainty. I'm sure. Then let's get started. I left Pierce's office 3 hours later carrying a briefcase full of legal documents, changed bank passwords, and something more valuable than all of it, a plan. For the first time in weeks, I walked with my shoulders back and my head up. I stopped at the hardware store and bought basic supplies, a small refrigerator for the trailer, a coffee maker, some decent sheets. If I was going to live there temporarily, I'd do it with dignity while my legal case played out. I also stopped at the Gillespie County Sheriff's Office and filed a report about the unauthorized sale of my property. Deputy Maria Santos took my statement seriously, especially when I showed her the photographs and Olivia's written witness statement that Pierce had helped me prepare. Mr. Porter, she said, I want you to know that elder abuse, financial or otherwise, is something we take very seriously in this county, even when it's family members. I returned to the ranch around 6 o'clock in the evening, feeling like a different man than the one who had left that morning. My truck was loaded with groceries and supplies, but more importantly, it was loaded with legal documentation that would change everything. When I pulled through the gate, I could see that the main house was lit up like Christmas. There were several cars in the driveway that I didn't recognize. Through the windows, I could see people moving around. It looked like Harper was hosting some kind of dinner party. I parked near the trailer and started unloading my supplies. I could hear voices and laughter from the house, the sound of people having a good time while I lived in exile 50 yards away on my own property. About 20 minutes later, Harper came strolling out to the trailer, still wearing that fake smile, but with an edge to it that hadn't been there before. Wesley, I see you went shopping. Good for you, taking some initiative. I was actually hoping we could have a little chat. About what? Well, my parents are here for dinner along with some potential business investors. It's quite important for my brand development. I was wondering if you could, well, maybe stay in the trailer this evening. We don't want any interruptions or awkward family dynamics interfering with business. I looked at her standing there in her designer dress, asking me to hide in a trailer on my own land so she could impress investors with property that belonged to me. Harper, I said calmly, I think it's time you and I had an honest conversation. Oh, we don't need to make this complicated. I just thought, I think you should invite me to dinner. She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Excuse me, I said. I think you should invite me to join you for dinner. In my house, with your parents and your investors. Harper's mask slipped just enough for me to see the calculation behind her eyes. Wesley, that's really not... Tonight is about business, and you might not understand the complexities of... Try me. There was a long moment where we stared at each other. Harper was probably trying to figure out if this was the same broken-down old man who had meekly accepted the trailer yesterday, or if something had changed. Something had definitely changed. Fine, she said finally. But please, try to... just don't embarrass us. 30 minutes later, I was sitting at my own dining table, the one I had bought at an estate sale 12 years ago, wearing my best shirt and looking directly at Harper's parents and their mysterious business associates. Harper's father, Garrett Williams, was a loud man with soft hands who sold insurance in San Antonio. Her mother, Isabella Foster, had the kind of pinched expression that suggested she spent most of her time judging other people and finding them lacking. The investors were two men in expensive suits who introduced themselves as Bradley Coleman from Austin and Kevin Morrison from Dallas. They seemed more interested in Harper than in any business proposal, and I noticed they paid cash for their drinks from an impressive bar setup that definitely hadn't been in my house 3 weeks ago. So, Mr. Porter, said Garrett Williams after Harper had served dinner, Harper tells us you've been helping them get established here on the ranch. Very generous of you to provide this kind of support for young entrepreneurs. I chewed my barbacoa slowly before responding. I'm curious about that myself. Harper, why don't you tell everyone exactly what kind of business you're running here? Harper's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What do you mean? I'd like to understand how social media content creation requires $2,300 a month in expenses, frequent car changes, and private meetings with businessmen when your husband isn't home. The silence at the table was sudden and complete. Bradley Coleman and Kevin Morrison exchanged glances. Isabella Foster's wine glass stopped midway to her lips. Wesley, Harper said with forced lightness, I think there's been some misunderstanding about... No misunderstanding. I've been reviewing the bank statements. 18 months, $41,200 in withdrawals from my savings account. I'm just wondering what all that money went toward. Garrett Williams cleared his throat uncomfortably. Now, Mr. Porter, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. I'm sure there is, too. Harper? Harper's face had gone pale, but she recovered quickly. Those were business investments, equipment, marketing, professional development. Building a brand requires significant upfront capital. And my grandfather's tools? What kind of business investment was selling those for $800? Your what? Isabella Foster asked sharply. Antique tools worth about $15,000. Family heirlooms from 3 generations of Porter men, sold to a dealer in Austin while I was burying my brother. Bradley Coleman was suddenly very interested in his plate. Kevin Morrison was checking his phone. "I think," said Harper with barely controlled anger, "that you're making our guests uncomfortable with these accusations." "I think," I replied calmly, "that our guests might be uncomfortable for other reasons." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos I had taken that morning. "Gentlemen, I'm curious about something. Do either of you recognize this vehicle?" I showed them a photo that Deputy Santos had taken of a gray sedan parked at our gate, the same vehicle Olivia had reported seeing multiple times. Kevin Morrison stood up so quickly his chair nearly fell over. "I think we should be going," he said. "Yes," Bradley Coleman agreed, already reaching for his jacket. "Thank you for dinner, but we have an early morning." They were out the door within 2 minutes, leaving behind a very expensive bottle of whiskey and a table full of confused faces. "What the hell was that about?" Garrett Williams demanded. I looked directly at Harper. "Why don't you ask your daughter?" Harper's face had turned from pale to bright red. "Those men were legitimate business contacts, and you just embarrassed me in front of potential investors with your paranoid accusations." "Paranoid?" I pulled out the bank statements Pierce had helped me organize. "Let me read you some of these business expenses. February, $2,800 for furniture and decor. March, $1,900, no description. May, $3,200 for business equipment." Want to explain what kind of equipment costs $3,200 for someone who films videos with a phone? "You have no right to look at those accounts," Harper snapped. "Actually, I do. It's my money. My account. Mitchell only has a card for emergencies." Garrett Williams leaned forward, his insurance salesman instincts clearly telling him something was very wrong. "Harper, honey, what's he talking about?" "You told us Mitchell owned this ranch." "He does own it," Harper said quickly. "Wesley is just confused about the paperwork." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the deed that Pierce had photocopied for me. "This is the deed to this property. Recorded with Gillespie County, clear title, no liens except the mortgage. See that name at the top? Wesley Porter. See any other names? I don't." Isabella Foster grabbed the paper and studied it with the intensity of a woman who had just discovered her daughter might have been lying to her for 3 years. "Harper Elizabeth Foster Williams," she said in the voice that had probably terrified Harper as a child. "You told us Mitchell owned this ranch when you got married. You said that's why it was such a good match." "It is a good match," Harper protested. "Wesley gave it to Mitchell. He just never finished the paperwork." "So it's not legally Mitchell's?" It's complicated." "No," I said firmly. "It's not complicated at all. I gave Mitchell permission to live here. I never transferred ownership. This ranch is mine, and I can revoke that permission anytime I choose." The room went dead silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, the one I had bought for Sarah's 50th birthday. Mitchell walked through the door at that moment, still wearing his work clothes, covered in dust from the drilling site. He took one look at the faces around the table and knew something had gone very wrong. "What's going on?" "Your father," Harper said with venom in her voice, "has been making wild accusations about our finances and embarrassing us in front of my business associates." Mitchell looked at me with tired eyes. "Dad, what are you doing? I'm asking questions that should have been asked a long time ago, like how your wife has spent $41,200 of my retirement money in 18 months. 41,000? Garrett Williams stood up from his chair. "Harper, what the hell is he talking about?" "It was for the ranch improvements," Harper said desperately, "to increase the property value. Tell them, Mitchell." Mitchell looked like a man who was drowning. He sat down heavily in the chair next to me, putting his head in his hands. "Mitchell," I said quietly, "did you authorize those transfers?" Harper said we needed money for the business. She said it was temporary, that she'd pay it back when her follower count grew enough to get major sponsorship deals. $41,000 temporary? Isabella Foster's voice could have cut glass. "Harper, where did that money go? Business expenses? Equipment, marketing, travel for content creation? Content creation that requires you to change cars every 2 weeks?" I asked. "Content creation that requires private meetings with men in expensive suits when your husband isn't home?" Harper's eyes went wide. "How do you know about—" She caught herself, but it was too late. "About what?" Garrett Williams demanded. "Nothing. He's making things up." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos Deputy Santos had helped me organize. These were taken by my neighbor over the past 6 months. Different cars in your driveway, strange men coming and going, always when Mitchell was at work. Mitchell looked up from his hands for the first time since sitting down. What men? She hasn't told you? I asked gently. About Bradley Coleman and Kevin Morrison? About the regular visitors who pay cash and leave quickly when they see anyone watching? Harper. Mitchell's voice was barely above a whisper. What men? Harper was trapped, and she knew it. I could see her calculating, trying to find a way out, a story that would explain everything without admitting the truth. They were helping me develop business contacts, networking for brand partnerships. What kind of networking requires cash payments and secrecy? Isabella Foster demanded. And what kind of networking makes men run away when shown a photograph of their car? I added. Mitchell stood up slowly, looking at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time. Harper, I want the truth. Right now. All of it. Harper's composure finally cracked. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I've been working with investors. Yes, they pay cash. Yes, it's private meetings. It's called building a business portfolio. And if you weren't working 12-hour days in some oil field, maybe you'd understand how modern entrepreneurship works. $41,000 of my father's money? Your father gave you that money. It was a gift. It was for emergencies, I said firmly. Not for whatever scheme you've been running. Scheme? Harper laughed bitterly. This from a man who's been spying on me, investigating me like I'm some kind of criminal. Aren't you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Harper opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Garrett. Williams cleared his throat. I think your mother and I need to have a private conversation with Harper. Mitchell, perhaps you and your father should discuss this situation. Yes, Isabella Foster agreed, her face stern. Harper, you and I are going to have a long talk about honesty and marriage, and what the hell you've really been doing in this house. As Harper's parents escorted her into the kitchen for what sounded like it would be a very unpleasant conversation, Mitchell and I were left alone at the dining room table. My son looked like he had aged 10 years in the past hour. Dad, he said finally, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about the money. I thought Harper was just buying things for the house, for her business. I never knew it was that much. Mitchell, look at me. He raised his head and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. My boy, scared and confused and needing his father. I need you to tell me the truth. Did you know about these men? About whatever business Harper has been conducting? No, I swear, Dad. I had no idea. I work 12-hour shifts at the site. I come home exhausted, eat dinner, and fall asleep watching TV. Harper handles everything else, including my money. I thought it was our money. I thought when you gave us access to the account, you meant for us to use it for the ranch. For emergencies, son. For real emergencies. From the kitchen, we could hear raised voices. Harper was crying, Isabella Foster was demanding answers, and Garrett Williams was asking questions in the tone of a man who had just realized his son-in-law might be harboring a criminal. What are we going to do? Mitchell asked. I looked at my son, my exhausted, confused, manipulated son, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Pity for him instead of anger. We're going to fix this, I said, but it's going to require some hard choices. The shouting from the kitchen got louder. I could hear Harper sobbing, Isabella Foster demanding explanations, and Garrett Williams using language that suggested his insurance salesman politeness had completely evaporated. Dad, Mitchell said quietly, what kind of hard choices? Before I could answer, the kitchen door swung open and Isabella Foster stormed out, her face white with fury. Behind her came Garrett Williams, shaking his head like a man who had just discovered his lottery ticket was counterfeit. Harper followed them, mascara running down her cheeks, looking desperate and cornered. Mom, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Isabella snapped. I understand that my daughter has been lying to everyone, including her husband, for months, maybe years. She turned to look at Mitchell and me with something that might have been embarrassment. Mitchell, I owe you an apology. We had no idea what Harper was doing. If we had known... What did she tell you? I asked. Garrett Williams sat down heavily at the table. She told us she's been running some kind of escort service, high-end companionship for wealthy businessmen. Cash payments, different cars to avoid being recognized, secret meetings when you were at work. The room went dead silent. Mitchell's face went through several different expressions before settling on something between horror and disbelief. "Escort service?" he whispered. Harper collapsed into a chair, no longer even trying to maintain her composure. It wasn't what you think. It was just dinner meetings, networking events, rich men who wanted attractive company for business functions. $41,000 worth of dinner meetings? I asked. Some of them paid very well for exclusive access to social events. Mitchell stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Are you telling me you've been selling? I never slept with anyone," Harper screamed. "It was just appearances, just being arm candy at expensive restaurants and corporate events, using my father's money to fund it. I needed startup capital, designer clothes, professional hair and makeup, the right car for the right client. You can't show up to a $500 per plate charity gala in a pickup truck." Isabella Foster looked like she was going to be sick. "Harper Elizabeth, how could you do this to your marriage, to your family?" "Because I wanted more," Harper shot back. "I wanted more than living on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, married to a man who comes home covered in oil and dirt, counting every penny while other women my age are living real lives." The words hit Mitchell like physical blows. He staggered backward, gripping the edge of the table for support. "More than me," he said quietly. "I married you because you said you owned this ranch, because you said we'd have security, property, a future. Instead, I got a trailer park with cows and a husband who works himself to death for $85,000 a year." $85,000 is good money, I said sharply. "It's honest money. Honest money doesn't buy the kind of life I want," Harper snapped. "It doesn't buy respect. It doesn't buy status. It doesn't buy anything that matters." Mitchell was staring at her like she was a complete stranger. "Everything you told me about loving me, about wanting to build a life together on the ranch, I thought I could make it work. I thought I could turn this place into something worthwhile, something that could generate real income. But it's just dirt and cows and old tools that belong in a museum." That's when something inside me finally snapped. "Those tools built this family," I said, standing up. "Those old tools put food on the table when your husband was a baby. They taught him everything he knows about work and honor and taking care of what's yours." "They're junk, Wesley. Everything here is junk. This whole lifestyle is junk. Then get out." The words came out quiet but clear, and everyone in the room heard them. "What?" I said, "Get out. This is my ranch, my house, my property. If it's all junk to you, then you can leave." Harper laughed bitterly. "You can't kick me out. I'm married to Mitchell. This is my home too." I walked to the briefcase that Pierce had prepared for me and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. "Actually, I can. These are eviction papers, properly filed with the county court. You have 30 days to vacate the premises or sign a lease agreement with monthly rent of $1,800. $1,800 a month?" Garrett Williams sputtered. "For rent?" "Market rate for a 5-acre ranch with a 3,200 square foot house in the hill country," I replied. "I had it appraised this morning." Harper's face went white. "Mitchell, you can't let him do this to us." Mitchell was still staring at her like he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. "Us?" he said finally. "Harper, there is no us. There hasn't been an us for God knows how long. There's been you, using me to live in my father's house while you did whatever this was. It was for our future. It was for your future, using my father's money that he saved for 42 years working in a factory." Harper turned to me with desperation in her eyes. "Wesley, please. I know I made mistakes, but I can fix this. I can pay back the money." "With what? Your escort service income? I'll get a real job. I'll work at Walmart if I have to. Just please don't make us homeless." "You won't be homeless," I said calmly. "Mitchell will always have a place here if he wants it. You, on the other hand, have 30 days to figure out your next move." Isabella Foster stood up. "Come on, Garrett. We're taking Harper home with us tonight. She needs to think about what she's done and what she's going to do next." "Mom, no, I can fix this. Harper, you've lied to your husband, stolen from his father, and apparently been doing things I don't even want to think about. You're coming home with us until you can figure out how to clean up this mess." As they prepared to leave, Harper made one last desperate attempt. "Mitchell, please, don't let them destroy our marriage over money." Mitchell looked at her with eyes full of pain and disappointment. "You destroyed our marriage, Harper. You destroyed it the day you decided I wasn't enough for you. The day you decided my father's life's work was junk. The day you decided to fund your dreams with stolen money." Harper started to cry again, but this time it looked real instead of manipulative. "I love you, Mitchell." "No," he said sadly. "You loved the idea of me. You loved what you thought I could give you. But you never loved me." After Harper and her parents left, Mitchell and I sat alone in the kitchen of the house I had bought with 42 years of honest work. "Dad," he said finally, "I don't know how to apologize for this. I don't know how to make it right. You start by telling me the truth about everything. All of it. How long you knew something was wrong, how much you suspected, how much you chose not to see." Mitchell nodded slowly. "I knew something was wrong for months. The spending, the secrets, the way she'd changed the subject whenever I asked about her business. But I was afraid to push too hard because I was afraid she'd leave. And now I realized she was already gone. She was never really here at all." Over the next 3 weeks, Mitchell and I had more honest conversations than we'd had in the previous 3 years. He moved his things out of the master bedroom and into the guest room, giving me back the bedroom I had shared with Sarah for 15 years. He helped me move my belongings out of the trailer and back into the house where they belonged. Most importantly, he helped me understand how Harper had manipulated him from the beginning. "She researched me before our first date," he told me one evening as we sat on the porch drinking beer and watching the sunset over the hill country. "She knew about the ranch, knew you had given it to me, knew about your savings account. She planned the whole thing." "How do you know that?" "I found her laptop after she left. She had spreadsheets, Dad. Spreadsheets with information about eligible bachelors in Central Texas, their assets, their family situations. I was literally a business plan to her." The betrayal ran deeper than either of us had imagined. Harper hadn't just married Mitchell for the ranch. She had targeted him specifically because she believed he was a weak man who could be controlled, with access to property and money that could fund her real ambitions. "The escort service was always the goal," Mitchell continued. "She told me she wanted to be an influencer, but that was just the cover story. She was building a client base of wealthy men who would pay for her company at business functions and social events." "And you never suspected?" Mitchell was quiet for a long time. "I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't want to see it. She was beautiful, Dad. She made me feel like I was worth something, like I was more than just another oil field worker. I was afraid that if I questioned her too hard, she'd realize I wasn't good enough for her and leave." "Son, you were always good enough. The problem was that she was never good enough for you." Pierce Coleman called the next morning with news about Harper's legal situation. "Wesley, I wanted to update you on the financial investigation. The sheriff's department has been working with the IRS, and it's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "Harper never reported any income from her business activities. We're looking at tax evasion on top of the elder financial abuse. And there's more. The men you encountered at dinner, Bradley Coleman and Kevin Morrison, they're both married businessmen from Austin who paid Harper significant amounts for what they called corporate entertainment services." "How significant?" "Between $2,000 and $5,000 per event. She was pulling in more money from that side business than Mitchell was making at his regular job. The mathematics of betrayal were staggering. Harper had been earning potentially $10,000, $15,000 per month from her escort activities while spending Mitchell's inherited money as operating capital. She had been living a double life funded by my retirement savings. What happens now? The DA is considering criminal charges, elder financial abuse, tax evasion, possibly fraud if they can prove she misrepresented her activities to clients. She's looking at serious jail time if convicted. Mitchell took the news harder than I expected. Despite everything Harper had done to him, to us, to our family, he still felt responsible for her fate. "Dad, maybe we should drop the charges. Maybe this is enough." "Son, look at me. What Harper did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. She stole money from an elderly man to fund illegal activities. She destroyed our family for personal profit. If we don't hold her accountable, she'll do the same thing to some other family." Mitchell nodded slowly. "I know you're right. It's just hard to watch someone you loved fall so far." "You didn't love Harper," I said gently. "You loved who you thought she was. There's a difference." 2 weeks later, Harper's attorney contacted Pierce with a plea bargain offer. She would plead guilty to elder financial abuse, agree to repay the full $41,200 with interest, and accept probation in exchange for dropping the tax evasion charges. Mitchell and I discussed it over coffee in the kitchen. "What do you think, Dad? I think justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about making things right and making sure it doesn't happen again." We accepted the plea agreement with one additional condition. Harper had to provide a full accounting of where every dollar had gone, including receipts and bank records. It was important to me that Mitchell understand the complete scope of what had been done with his father's money. The final accounting was sobering: $12,400. Designer clothing and accessories for professional appearances, $8,600. Vehicle lease payments and insurance for luxury cars, $7,300. High-end hotel stays for out-of-town business meetings, $4,200. Professional hair, makeup, and beauty treatments, $3,800. Expensive dinners and entertainment for client acquisition, $2,900. Photography and website development for her online presence, $2,000. Legal consultation when she thought she might get caught. The remaining funds had gone to day-to-day expenses that she had hidden from Mitchell: shopping sprees, spa treatments, and cash payments to other women who helped her coordinate her activities. "She spent our entire inheritance on costume jewelry and hotel rooms," Mitchell said, staring at the documents. "She spent it on a fantasy," I corrected. "A fantasy where she was someone important instead of someone honest." The day Harper signed the plea agreement, she asked to speak with Mitchell privately. They met at a coffee shop in Fredericksburg, and he told me about it afterward. "She asked me to forgive her," he said. "She said she never meant for things to go so far, that she really did love me but got caught up in the excitement of easy money and feeling powerful." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that forgiveness was something she'd have to earn over time, not something she could get by asking for it. And I told her that even if I eventually forgave her, I would never trust her again." Harper moved back to San Antonio with her parents. She got a job at a department store and began making monthly payments of $500 toward the restitution. At that rate, it would take her almost 7 years to repay what she had stolen, assuming she never missed a payment. Mitchell filed for divorce, which Harper did not contest. The proceedings were simple since there were no shared assets and no children involved. On the day the divorce was finalized, Mitchell came home and found me in the workshop sorting through the tools that remained, the ones Harper hadn't managed to sell. "Dad, I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "I want to buy some of Grandpa Earl's tools back, the ones Harper sold. I know we can't get the original ones, but maybe we can find similar vintage tools and start rebuilding the collection." I looked at my son, thinner than he'd been a year ago, but stronger somehow, more solid in ways that had nothing to do with physical appearance. "Son, those tools were never about the tools themselves. They were about the work we do with our hands, the pride we take in building something that lasts, the way we teach the next generation to be better than we were." "I know. That's why I want them back. I want to remember what you taught me about work and honor. I want to have something to pass down if I ever have children." "Then let's go shopping for tools," I said, putting my arm around his shoulder. "And this time, we'll make sure they stay in the family." 6 months later, I was standing in my workshop, my reclaimed workshop, watching Mitchell install a new workbench we had built together from reclaimed oak. The space looked different now. Gone were Harper's ring lights and camera equipment, replaced by the familiar smell of motor oil and honest work. We had found most of the vintage tools we needed at estate sales and antique shops across Central Texas. Not the original Porter family tools, but close enough. A 1947 Craftsman socket set from an estate in Austin, hand-forged hammers from a retired blacksmith in Kerrville, a machinist's precision level that looked almost identical to the one my grandfather had brought from Pennsylvania. "Dad," Mitchell said, testing the workbench for stability, "I've been thinking about what you said, about legacy and what we pass down. Oh, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest." I set down the wrench I'd been holding and gave him my full attention. "I want to know if you can ever forgive me, really forgive me, not just say the words, but actually trust me again." It was a question I had been expecting, and one I had thought about every day for the past 6 months. "Son, forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing to move forward despite what happened. Have you learned from this?" Yes, sir. Do you understand now why I worked so hard to build something worth passing down? Yes, sir. Do you understand the difference between a woman who loves you for who you are and one who loves you for what you can give her? Mitchell smiled for the first time in our conversation. I'm starting to figure that out. There's a woman at the drilling company, an engineer named Sarah Coleman. She drives a 10-year-old Honda, packs her own lunch, and thinks my stories about ranch work are interesting instead of embarrassing. Sounds promising. What makes her different? She asked to see pictures of the workshop. She wanted to know about Grandpa Earl's tools and why they mattered to our family. She didn't ask about the house or how much land we have or whether I had any inheritance coming. Smart woman. I think so, but I'm not rushing into anything. I need to be sure about who I am before I can be sure about who I want to be with. That evening, we sat on the porch watching the sun set over the hill country, just like we had done when Mitchell was a boy. The silence was comfortable now instead of strained. Dad, can I ask you something else? Shoot. Do you ever regret giving me the ranch? I mean, if you had kept it in your name from the beginning, Harper never would have been able to do what she did. I thought about that for a long time before answering. Son, the ranch was never really mine to keep forever. I bought it, I improved it, I worked it, but ultimately, it was always meant to be passed down. That's what land is for, to give your children something solid to build their lives on. But I almost lost it. Almost doesn't count. You didn't lose it because when the time came to choose between what was easy and what was right, you chose right. That's all any father can ask for. Mitchell was quiet for a while, watching the last light fade behind the mesquite trees. I've been thinking about kids, he said finally. Your own kids? Yeah, someday. And I keep thinking about what I'd want to teach them, about work and family and not being fooled by people who don't have your best interests at heart. What would you teach them? That everything worth having requires work. That family isn't about what you can get from each other, it's about what you're willing to give. And that tools aren't junk. They're history, they're skill, they're the way one generation passes knowledge to the next. I felt something in my chest that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Pride in my son that wasn't mixed with worry or disappointment. You'd be a good father, Mitchell. I had a good example. 3 months later, Pierce Coleman called with the final update on Harper's case. Wesley, I thought you should know. Harper completed her community service and made her first 6 monthly payments on time. Her probation officer says she's been compliant with all the terms of her plea agreement. How is she doing? From what I understand, she's working full-time at a department store, living with her parents, and seeing a counselor twice a week. Her attorney says she's expressed genuine remorse for what she did to your family. Good. I hope she learned something from all this. There's something else. She asked her attorney to pass along a message. She wanted you to know that she understands now why those tools meant so much to you and Mitchell. She said she's sorry for not understanding the difference between price and value. After I hung up, I walked out to the workshop where Mitchell was restoring a 1965 Ford pickup we had bought at an auction. He was using the vintage tools we had collected, taking his time, doing the work right instead of fast. Harper's doing okay, I told him, making her payments, staying out of trouble. Mitchell nodded without looking up from the engine he was working on. I hope she finds whatever she was really looking for. What do you think she was looking for? Respect, maybe. Or security. Or just a way to feel important. He paused, wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag. I understand that now. I was looking for some of the same things when I met her. And now? Now I know those things come from inside, not from what other people give you or think about you. As I write this, it's been a year since I found my tools scattered in the dirt. Mitchell is engaged to Sarah Coleman, who turned out to be everything Harper wasn't. Honest, hardworking, and genuinely interested in building something lasting, instead of just taking what someone else had built. The ranch is officially back in my name, with a clear will that ensures it will pass to Mitchell when I'm gone, but with legal protections that prevent anyone from taking it away from our family again. Harper completed her probation and moved to Dallas, where she got a job in marketing for a legitimate company. She sends a payment every month, along with a brief note updating us on her progress. I don't know if she ever found what she was really looking for, but I hope she learned that you can't build happiness on someone else's foundation. The workshop is full again, full of tools and projects and the sound of honest work. Mitchell and I rebuilt a 1967 Mustang that now sits in the barn next to my original 1970 Chevelle. We're planning to start on a 1955 Ford pickup next, using the same methodical approach my grandfather taught me. Measure twice, cut once, and never rush work that's meant to last. Every Sunday, Sarah comes over for dinner, and afterward, the three of us sit on the porch and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes she asks Mitchell to tell stories about his grandfather's tools or about growing up on the ranch. Sometimes she just listens while we plan next week's work or discuss improvements to the property. Last month, she surprised us both by asking if I would teach her how to use the vintage lathe we had acquired. "I want to understand the tools that built this family," she said. "I want to be part of preserving that knowledge." That's when I knew Mitchell had found the right woman. If you're reading this story and you recognize yourself in it, if you're a father who has been taken advantage of, a son who has been manipulated, or someone who has confused price with value, I want you to know something important. It's never too late to stand up for what's right. It's never too late to demand respect. It's never too late to teach people that actions have consequences and that family isn't about what you can take from each other. It's about what you're willing to give. I'm 69 years old now, and I've learned that dignity isn't something you're born with or something someone can give you. It's something you choose every day in how you treat yourself and how you allow others to treat you. Don't let anyone throw your tools in the dirt and call them junk. Don't let anyone convince you that your life's work doesn't matter. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're a burden when you're actually a blessing. Stand up. Fight back. Show them who really owns the ranch. Because sometimes, the best lesson you can teach someone is that there are consequences for treating good people badly. And sometimes, the best gift you can give your children is the knowledge that they come from a family that doesn't give up, doesn't back down, and never forgets the difference between what's easy and what's right. The Porter family ranch is still here, still strong, still building things that last. And that's exactly how it should be. The end.